I don't know, like, she's out there. You're the Florida version of Sex in the City, JD.
That's when I was smoking my cigars.
Don't be an asshole today.
Dick.
Hello, Paul Burston.
Hello, where's my video? There I am.
I knew you were going to look prettier than me.
I'm being nautical because I'm in Hastings, so.
That's absolutely perfect. It's pouring down buckets here.
Oh.
Oh, look at you. You're so damn cute. I'm so happy to have you. I can't even tell you. And I'm sorry I look like a wreck. We just had like major drama because my neighbors just got a new cat, and they have a cat door. And so for the last few weeks, they've been sitting out in the garden, letting the cat come out and whatnot. Well, he must have got out on his own tonight, and this crack of thunder that was so loud freaked him out.
Oh my
He was
God.
running across our shared wall, and he was kind of stuck in the corner in my backyard up on the wall. We couldn't get him down, and it started pouring. And so it was all kinds of like hectic. My wife was out there trying to coax it, and I'm texting them like crazy, and they weren't home. They were at work, so they told their roommate, and then the roommate came outside. She got soaked. She was trying to coax him down.
Oh no.
Finally, I said, go get his treats or his food and shake it. And she got him. She finally got him. But yeah, I'm a mess. I'm soaked. I had put a hat on.
Oh.
So I apologize for looking like a wreck, but you know, lesbians and cats, we are heroes when it comes to the cats. So how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, very good.
You are one of my heroes on Facebook and Twitter. I'm not gonna lie, I love your posts, whether it's just your knees at the beach, or whether it's about a Madonna dream, or if it's a Bowie picture or a Brando picture. Like
I've not had a Madonna dream for a while.
It's been some time.
Yeah.
Maybe we just planted the seed.
The seed, exactly. It'll probably happen tonight now.
It's amazing. How weird that on my Facebook memories thing, it popped up of a picture of me and my wife saying, heading off to Polari.
Was that today's?
That was today. And I was like,
my God.
Oh, wow. But yeah, my co-host couldn't join us tonight because she's got everybody in her family has COVID, and she's taking care of everybody. So but I was telling her, I said, I'm really excited to have Paul, because for me, Polari is like synonymous with me. When I moved here, that was the first event that I went to. And that was like, I'm on my 10th year living here. So it was like, I remember reading about it when I was still living in the States. And then I came over here, and it was, I think within the first week that I moved here, that we went, and it was one of the ones at, Royal Festival Hall or at South Bank. And I just enjoyed it so much. And it was, it was really, for a long time, it was part of our like regular monthly gig. I loved it. I was always waiting to see what you were going to wear.
Yeah, me too.
I always, I absolutely adore like everybody that you select to read. They've got such personality, or their stuff is so interesting or funny. Like something always grabs you, and you leave there like having met like a new author, or became interested in a genre that maybe you didn't think you would be interested in, just by a little clip that somebody was reading. And those excerpts, some like Colin Kelly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm such a fan. And so now I'm like Facebook friends with him, and still keeping up with everything that he's doing. I mean, so many faces. And Val, having seen Val there, I think the following week after the first time that we saw Val there, we went to go see her stand up, and then just became fans, and worked with her like at Alpha.
As you would.
Yeah, she's something else. I think your relationship with her is so sweet. It's so cute.
Oh,
She's a
I
big
think,
part
well,
of everything that you've been up to, though.
yeah, well, I mean, she's been a really interesting person to have met because I can't remember, I think we met about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe even more. And no, more than that, actually, more than that. About 15 years ago, we were on the same bill at an event. And it wasn't, I won't name the event, but it wasn't great. It wasn't very well organized. And as the authors, you kind of like sort of, took solace in each other. I remember we bought each other's book.
That's the first thing.
There were so few people there. And we just bonded in that situation. And we have lots of things in common. So we just discovered that we were sort of, despite our many differences, we have a lot of similarities. So, and then we sort of got involved in a writing group together, which we still do, just the two of us still, even though the group doesn't exist. We just do it together now.
Yeah.
So she's been a really big part of my writing life and also my performing life, because unlike Val, I'm not really a natural performer. I kind of had to sort of learn how to be comfortable on stage. I wasn't comfortable on stage when I started out at all. Even though I did drama at university, which is, whatever, bizarre, but I sort of did have, theatrical ambitions at one point when I was very young, but I used to get crippling stage fright, really crippling stage fright. Like I'd be literally physically sick. And so when I became an author, and suddenly it was like, I became an author because it was a way of being creative, and it sort of gave me the thing I was missing in my life. It gave me a kind of way of describing the world and how I felt about the world and what I saw and what I thought and so on. But it was a way of doing it in a very introverted way. But of course, the reality is, once the book is out there, you then need to go out there and sell it. So then you need to go to events and stuff. And I used to get so nervous having to go and read in public. It used to terrify me, absolutely terrify me.
Amazed at this revelation. You would never.
Yeah, and I just learned from watching other people, and Val was one of them. Stella Duffy was one, and Neil Bartlett was one. And I remember watching them. We were on the same, we were on the same bill at various points, and just watching how they handled it and learning from them. And the key thing is to basically, tell yourself and remind yourself that people have come to see you and that they want you to be good.
Right.
But if you're someone like me, I was bullied a lot as a child. So when you've been bullied a lot, you have this sort of, fight or flight thing that kicks in. Right. So when you're faced with lots of people looking at you, it makes you feel quite anxious. So I have to kind of like remind myself that this is not that. This is something very different to that.
Right.
And I learned very quickly that if I get people to laugh quickly, that relaxes me. So that's why I tell terrible jokes when I come on stage. I just have some really, really awful bad pun or cheap visual gag or something to make people laugh. Because the minute the audience laughs, I'm fine. I'm fine with it then.
Right. You tend to relax a little bit, and
yeah, completely. Yeah. And then I enjoy myself. I enjoy it.
It is. Yeah. I think I don't. Obviously you don't realize it, but you have like an incredible presence and charisma, and I think it's a combination of that, and like I said, the perfect picks of readers, and to your testament, Polari's been going on for so long, and then the workshop, the Polari workshop that you were able to travel around and have the workshop was genius. Like, what an incredible idea that was. Because
the workshop is part of a touring program. So we started Polari in 2000. Well, I started in 2007, moved to South Bank in 2009. And then we were just resident at South Bank and doing the occasional pop-up event elsewhere in London, usually somewhere like the Museum of London or the Metropolitan Archives or wherever we were invited to, or Pride or something like that.
Yeah.
But we'd only ever been as far as Watford Library. That was as far as we got. And in 2013, a woman who runs a festival called Huddersfield Literature Festival, called Michelle Hodgson, who happened to be the sister of my former editor from my first few novels, Antonia, contacted me and said, would you bring Polari to the festival? And that was the first time we'd sort of gone north of Watford. And it just, when I realized that it traveled well and that actually I could do this without being, because at the South Bank, I got very used to being, let me turn my mail off. At the South Bank, I got very used to being in a familiar setting where I would turn up and I would know the staff, I would know the stage, I would know things, so it can relax me. And I got a bit apprehensive that if I went touring, I may not be able to recreate that elsewhere.
Yeah.
And also the audience dynamic, because lots of South Bank are regulars, so there's always regular faces in the audience.
Exactly.
But they put you at ease because they're friendly.
Right.
And we did Huddersfield Lit Fest that year, and it went down a storm. We had a really big audience, and it went down a storm. And around about the same time, somebody else that I know, another writer, was doing an Arts Council funded project. And during her meeting with the Arts Council, my name came up and they said, oh, why hasn't Paul contacted us about Polari? And I hadn't even thought to do that. So I was kind of invited to go and speak to them. And I went along with this presentation. I'd sort of prepared everything. And I sat down with these two women and I started doing this presentation. And then one of them said, can I just stop you there? And I said, what? She said, you don't need to convince us. We already know. We want to support this. What can we do for you?
Oh my
So I was like, oh, wow. So I said, oh, I want to go on tour. So I got funding for the first tour in 2014. And that was for 8 destinations. And then each year it's gone up. So we did 8 and then 10 and then 12. And so every year we've toured. So the current tour is 22 dates. And obviously because of COVID, some of those happened in a virtual way.
Right.
Some have happened in between, when there's been in between lockdowns. So we've been to, well, we've done the London ones and sort of London sort of, the suburbs of London ones. So some north, south, east, west. We've been up to Edinburgh. No, not Edinburgh. Sorry, Manchester.
Okay.
We're going back to Manchester again. We're doing 2 dates there, and we're going to Edinburgh and Newcastle and Brighton over the next month or so.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So the tour ends at the end of October, and obviously it was meant to take place last year because last year was the anniversary. So the Polari's been running since 2007, and the Polari Book Prize began in 2011. So last year was the 10th anniversary of the prize. So the tour was
right.
The tour was hooked to the prize, but then of course I literally got the grant acceptance letter literally a week before the world stopped. So it was like, you're going on tour, here's the money, get on with it, and then bam, you can't do any of this stuff. So all the events I had lined up last year, most of them got either postponed or shelved, or some of them went online. One of the things about doing that is I mean, everything that happens, I always like to sort of think that, things happen to you and the test is how you respond to them.
Yeah.
And as a creative person, you're always having to find ways of making things work because everything is a struggle when you're creative. Trust me, it really is. And
so true.
You're always battling to find ways of making something get funded or make it work and make it happen. And going online, although it doesn't give me the same experience as being on stage, like we did a big gig at Heaven. I mean, being on the main stage at Heaven nightclub is a phenomenal thing to do.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's like a rock star stage with a literary salon. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I love doing that. But the nice thing about doing the online events was that I discovered that lots of people would attend them and they were happy to pay like £5, whatever it was, to go on to come to the event. And there were people that wouldn't normally come to a physical event, either because we weren't accessible to them, we weren't in their area of the country,
right,
or because they had issues around access, or because they had childcare, or whatever the reason. There were lots of reasons why people that were interested hadn't been before, and they were also coming to the online events. And it was the same with the workshops, because whenever we tour, we always do a writing workshop at each destination. So we'll go to Edinburgh, And in the daytime, we'll do a workshop at a library and invite people from the community to come and do a writing workshop. And then we choose one person from the workshop and add them to the bill in the evening.
Oh, okay.
And obviously, because of COVID, we've not been doing workshops. We've been doing them online. And what I found is that actually the uptake for the workshops is far higher doing them online than it is doing them in person.
That interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah,
think some.
I can kind of see why it would work, you know. I mean,
Yeah, and you
there's a
don't.
level of comfortability, you know, in your own home.
Exactly, and also you don't need that sort of communal shared experience for a workshop. It's not the same as doing a performance. It's different. So
Yeah,
Polari online events are very different to Polari on stage. It's much more conversational.
right.
People will read a little bit, but then I'll talk to them a lot. So it's not performative in the way that Polari is on stage, where it's a series of readings.
Yeah, yeah,
Online, it tends to be much more intimate. It's more of a conversation.
yeah.
But the workshops are very different, and they've just taken off hugely. So we've been doing courses. We did a block of 6. We did a block of 6 back in July, and we just started a second block of 6 last night, which was
Oh, wow.
fully booked. They've
That's
been fully
the
booked.
kind of motivation that lazy ass writers like me need, you know. When I
Karen
had a little writing group, because I knew you had a writing group, and I was like, well, if Paul could put together a writing group, I could put together a writing group. So I had my 2 friends come over, and it was the you know, proverbial kick in the ass, you know, because you knew that group was meeting, you know, that week, and you wanted to bring something to the table, you know, and it kind of spurred you on. Whereas, you know, normally, because I'm here by myself, I would be cleaning or cooking or,
Yeah.
you know, doing something to not sit down and write, you know. It'd be, you know, you let those distractions in. But when there's a goal of having to share your work, or you want to get something critiqued, or you have an idea, you know, knowing that there's other people, you know, that are going to be there for you.
I think anything that you can put in place to motivate yourself, because every writer I know, well, just about every writer I know, and I'm talking people who've been, you know, published many times in many cases, they all have the same procrastination. They all have the thing where they're on Facebook saying, yeah, I'm meant to be writing my new novel, so this is what I've done today. And they've basically reordered the spice rack, they've, you know, tidied the kitchen, they've cleaned the bathroom. We always find ways of avoiding it. And one of the things that Karen MacLeod, who is an author and also performs as Barbara Brownskirt, the terrible comedy poet.
Yes.
She runs our writing workshop with me, and she leads on it, and she's a fantastic writing coach. And she always says, you know, that you basically have to make the time. And that doesn't mean that you're going to spend all day writing, but you're going to give yourself an hour or half an hour or whatever it may be, but you're going to do that every day or every other day and make a routine of it.
Right.
And slowly it builds up. And there are some days when you sit down to write and it's the last thing you want to do. And God knows I've had those days. I have those days still regularly. I've got a novel to finish at the moment, and I'm doing everything I can to kind of avoid getting back into it. But, you know, once you sit down and actually write, rather than just, I think the thinking about writing, the anticipation of it's a bit like stage fright. Yes. If you just get on and do it, then it happens. If you spend all your time worrying about not doing it, it becomes a stumbling block. Yeah. And you get, you know, writer's block, which I never used to believe in because I'm a journalist, and journalists don't get writer's block because you've got to deliver a copy on time to a deadline.
Exactly.
And, you know, I got writer's block after I published my first novel, and I suddenly had this weight of expectation because the first novel did well and got very good reviews. And so when I was writing the second one, I suddenly had that, you know, difficult second album syndrome. Right. And I was so anxious that all the people that had enjoyed the first one weren't going to like this one. Right. And so it wasn't like writing it for myself first and foremost, which you must always do that. I think all writers must write. Your first reader is yourself. Right. You know, yes. And you really have to write for yourself first and let everything else go away. It's different if you're writing, say, a detective series, then obviously you have your characters and you have your your protagonist, and there are certain rules you need to stick with. But if you're writing standalone novels, which many people do, and I certainly do, then really that novel is whatever you decide it's going to be. There's nothing to say what it's going to be. I mean, it may be of a certain genre, but apart from that, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And the first draft, or what Stephen King calls the zero draft, which I think is a really good way of describing it, is basically the draft for you to just put anything, just do whatever the hell you want, because it's only going to get rewritten anyway.
Yeah,
Writing is all about rewriting.
Yeah.
All writing is rewriting.
It
Writing
really
rewriting.
is.
It's just, the first splurge draft is just to get it down. And I've learned now just to have fun with that, and not to be fearful of the fact that you've got, 80 or 100,000 words to write, whatever it is, typical of a novel. But just to think of it in terms of what scene am I writing today? What character am I writing today? And just enjoy it. And also you don't even need to write in sequence. Sometimes you'll have a character or a scene that isn't working. And I used to get myself so hung up on that I couldn't move on until I'd fixed it. Now I just make a note and it's saying this needs to be da da da, and then I just go on and I work on another scene, and then I come back to it fresh.
Right.
Or I go to the gym, or I go for a run, or I go for a swim, or whatever. I just do something else and then come back to it. And there isn't that fear about it now. I tend to feel much freer as a writer as a consequence of that.
I love the fact that you tackle, you started out with some sassy novels, they were the Gay Divorcee, and they were sassy. And but now you've kind of like headstrong gone into these crime novels, they're suspenseful, and I think that's like, I feel like I don't know how to write any other way other than, like, everybody that reads my stuff always says it's so visual and there's so much dialogue that I read it like a movie, and I don't know how to write any other way, and so what I started doing was writing short stories, and like a start to finish little short story, and just put it away and not think about it. And then, later on, I can expand. Like my third book was based on a short story, and I thought, God, there's so much more. There's so much more to be done here. Like I can really chew on this for a bit, and that's how that one got done. And I like short stories, because if I have an idea, my best work is in that little idea, and I know there's more to it. But if I just get that part out and then leave it for a little bit to stew, I'm Italian. It's like a sauce on Sunday. Like, just let it cook all day.
Yeah, I agree.
That's how we think. So I like that you've gone in a different direction, and people are loving it. Like what was the last one? The
Closer I Get.
Yeah. Okay, so when that one came out, I felt like there was so much hype, there was so much anticipation, and I was just waiting for it to drop. Like it's great that everybody's taken to it, and they didn't pigeonhole you as like a sassy gay writer,
Well, I think, I mean, to be honest with you, after The Gay Divorcee, which was 2009, I had a real sort of a few setbacks that happened all at once, personal and professional, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I sort of felt that I'd kind of exhausted my interest in that type of book that I've written 4 of those books, 4 novels of that, vaguely of that same sort of genre.
Yeah.
And I sort of had an idea for a story that was going to be very different and very dark. And the reality is, although I was writing these kind of frothy comedies, sort of comedies of sexual manners, really, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah.
The books that I actually read for pleasure have always been dark. I've always been a Stephen King thriller horror fan, always, all my life.
Oh, okay.
So that was always there, So I had this idea for this book that became The Black Path, that ended up being my first crime novel,
Mhm.
the one before Closer I Get. And
Yeah.
The Black Path, I wrote it not realizing it was a thriller. I just knew that it was a dark story. It was about an army wife, and it was about people that I grew up with. I grew up in an army recruitment town in South Wales, where
Oh, wow.
the local cemetery is just full of soldiers' graves going back to all the wars. And
Oh,
I'd met this gay soldier guy called James Wharton, who was the first out gay soldier to appear on the cover of Soldier magazine, and we met at a charity event and we became friends. And he'd served in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and I just became very fascinated by what it would mean to be an out gay soldier. It was sort of 10 years after the lifting of the Armed Forces Bill, the changing of the Armed Forces Bill, and I had this idea for where there'd be these two characters. So you'd have like Helen, who is the central character, who is the wife, and then you'd have the husband, who's in Afghanistan, and he is serving alongside an openly gay, very flirtatious, very cocky soldier. And it was, to me, that was just so fascinating, because I wanted to write. I knew that even though I was writing about a straight marriage in crisis, I knew there'd be a gay element to it, because it's me, it's like there's going to be a gay element somewhere, honey.
yeah.
So I got this character in there as a kind of disruptive influence, and then of course I gave Helen a similarly disruptive influence, which is this very hard, tough, charismatic girl called Sian, who she meets on a night out when she's gone out with a girl some work. And that was very much based on the town where I grew up in South Wales, because that's what people do. They go out on a Friday night and they get absolutely slaughtered. And the women are as hard as the men. Trust me, you do not want to cross the women. Seriously.
Oh, nothing like a Friday night piss up.
Yeah, and those women, I know those women. I grew up with those women. I know them, and they're my people, really. They're my tribe. And I wanted to kind of pay homage to them. So you've got these sort of two different war zones, really. You've got kind of an actual physical war zone, Afghanistan. Then you've got this sort of really, really dangerous place on a Friday night when everyone is drunk and everyone's edgy and things turn violent very, very quickly, and they often do. I mean, on Saturday, you're just walking on broken glass all around the center of town. There's just glass everywhere.
Yeah.
And so that was how the Black Path came about, and I didn't realize it was a thriller until I'd sort of written half of it. And the writing group that I was in, Val was one of the writers, and another writer called Diane, and they both said to me, "This is a thriller." And I was like, "Oh my God, I hadn't realized it was a thriller." So once I realized what it was, then I kind of, took made a few tweaks to make it work in that way. But actually, it isn't that different from writing Black comedies, because comedy relies on surprise.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry. I
Comedy
just want to let my neighbor know their cat is home. I'm so sorry. We will edit this out. Okay. There you go.
Right, thrillers aren't, writing them isn't that different to writing comedy, because comedy relies on the element of surprise. It relies on plot twists. It relies on revelations.
Timing.
But the timing is to get a laugh.
Yes.
And with a thriller, you're doing the same thing, but to get a gasp. But it's the same. It's the same mechanism. Exactly. But it is the same mechanism. It's about getting that, building up the tension, and then there's the release.
Right.
And what I found,
do you ever struggle with, will the release be worthy of the buildup?
Of course. Okay. And I mean, with the Black Path in particular, because it was my first foray into that genre as a writer, I had both of the women in the writing group saying to me, "Make it more." Because I'd had there's a bit, I won't spoil it, people haven't read it, but there's a very, very big scene towards the end where all the characters, everything comes to a huge climax. And there is a bonfire, and there is a fight, and there is, somebody gets hurt and somebody dies. And I was being really tentative about it, because I was very, very conscious as a gay man writing violence between and involving women. I felt really uncomfortable about writing it.
Oh, wow.
And they were saying, no, go on, push it more. So I think having sort of worked on that book, there are virtually no laughs in that book. I think there's maybe one scene in The Black Path where Helen goes out with the girls and work, and one of the girls is very funny, Angela. She's very witty, very sharp, fast talking,
Right.
because that's the kind of girls that I knew, and I know. So there's probably a couple of laughs in that chapter, which is very, but after that, there's no laughs. It's all played very, very straight. When I came to do The Closer I Get, because I knew by then that I could write this genre, because the Black Path wasn't a huge thing, but it was number one in W.H. Smith's travel. It got very good
I thought
reviews.
it was really successful. Yeah.
Yeah, it went down. It was well received as well. So I sort of thought, well, I can let myself, enjoy bit of humor in this one. So The Closer I Get, although it's very dark and it is based on, I had an online stalker. It ended up going to court. It was a horrible time in my life.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Right.
But part of the story is inspired by it. So I got something out of that experience. But I was able, when I was writing it, to actually let myself have fun with it and let because I decided very early on that it would only work if the main voice wasn't the voice of the target, which people would assume would be based on me. He partly is, but he really isn't me. But there's elements, but not really.
Yeah.
That I thought that wouldn't work, because that would be too much like therapy, writing as therapy, which isn't what I wanted to do. So I thought, no, I'm going to write it from her point of view. It was a female stalker that I had. I'm going to write it from her point of view. So I'm going to make her the key voice in this book. And once I made that decision and got into the head of this very fictionalized, very different character to the actual person that originally inspired the situation, once I created that character of Evie, and I literally could hear her voice in my head all the time, whispering in my head. It was so easy to write her. It was like channeling something. It came really easily. Once I got that, I realized I can have fun with this, because she's dark and twisted and obsessive, but she's clever. And people like that are going to be witty, and she's very well read. She's a book blogger. She's obsessed with authors. She knows her stuff. Yeah. So it gave me a chance to have fun with all the stuff that I've done in the past. I was an English graduate. I did a master's degree, and I've, the whole sort of academic backdrop to my life. So she sort of served as a kind of way of having a bit of fun with all those things and
everything, right?
Even though it is a very, very dark book, and it's a very, it's probably a more, it has a darker ending than The Black Path does, because there's virtually there's no redemption in it. It just ends it's very bleak ending.
Yeah.
Whereas Black Path, there is a kind of, there's a kind of horrible thing, and then there's a kind of, and now there's a ray of hope here,
like a little tidiness at the end. Yeah.
There's not in The Closer I Get. It ends in a really crushing way, but along the way there's lots of fun. And
it's like I like to equate it with like how when Killing Eve first came out, and everybody was like a little bit mortified, but they liked it. and that was the key. They liked it. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, because those characters were so flawed. And you so rarely get to see that kind of psychosis and then like enjoy it, and I think that was just like one of those weird things that everybody just took to. And I think, when you can write a character like that, I mean, that's great. I mean, because
also, I'm one of those people that grew up watching Betty Davis movies and watching, it's funny how you're just drawn to these things. I mean, I grew up watching Coronation Street and with my mum, and then I got drawn to watching Betty Davis films on the television, and I became obsessed with her when I was very young. And when I was doing I did my master's degree in drama and film, so I did film studies, and I did so-called women's pictures, which is obviously all those movies from the 40s, Joan Crawford, the Barbara Stanwicks, all those movies that came out after the war, and they're all about the femme fatale, the bad girl, and those films are a huge part of my DNA, and I love those characters, and I always have done. I love powerful women getting away with it, because that is not what happens in real life often.
Right.
And
It's so true.
there's something very satisfying about that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a really great film in the early 90s, because I was a film critic when I started. When I became a journalist, I was a film critic at the beginning of my journalistic
I
career.
remember when you were writing for Time Out. I was working for I was working for Sharon Gless at the time.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
even before I was at Time Out, so you know, I went there in 1993, and I was a journalist for about 4 years before that, and I used to write for Sight and Sound and City Limits and other places, and I used to write about film mostly. And there was a film at that time by, I think it was a John Sayles film, called The Last Seduction, and it's an absolutely brilliant sort of 90s twist on a classic noir with this really sexy, it was a bit like the era of Basic Instincts. It was all about the femme fatale, but she gets away with it.
Yeah,
she gets away with it.
That's the
she's an absolutely appalling, evil, awful woman, but you love her and she gets away with it, you know. So I take great delight in that, because I like, as a writer, I think that comes from being queer as well. I think, you know, I take great pleasure in subverting things. I love creating expectations and then subverting them, or creating characters and subverting them. So you meet a character and you think they're one thing and suddenly they're not that, they're actually something else. So obviously, as queer people, we understand that thing about identity because we've done it, you know, we've lived it.
Yeah,
we've lived it.
Oh,
We
definitely.
pretended to be something we're not. We have to survive when we're little.
Yeah.
So I think there's I'm naturally drawn to that. And
I think women like it because it, you know, everybody has that, and they won't say it out loud, but they all have that fantasy of you know, being a bitch and getting away with it, you know, or you know, being cunning and getting away with it, or not getting called out on it, getting away with it. You know, everybody has that little inner want about that. So yeah,
absolutely.
I can totally relate.
And especially if you're an outsider, you know, if you're a woman in a patriarchal society, if you're a queer person in a heterosexual society, if you're Black, whatever it may be, if you're an outsider or you're put down for any reason, you are going to be potentially somebody who's going to really enjoy these stories that subvert the norms, subvert the expectations. And for me, that's one of the great pleasures of writing, whether it's a joke, whether it's a punchline, whether it's a twist in a story. It's about subverting expectations, because that creates you create tension, then you subvert the expectation, and that's the payoff.
Right.
And as a writer, that gives me a huge amount of pleasure. It's what draws me to my project.
It so well. I mean, people. I love the fact that you know, I feel lucky, you know, that I know you enough to be able to, you know, follow you on Facebook and you know, get little glimpses into your life and know when something's coming up. You know, I'm not just a reader that doesn't know you or have never seen you, or you know, that they pick up a book and now they've become, you know, a fan. Like, I know you. I feel like I got the inside track on when something's coming out, and I cherish that. Like, it's a privilege. So I
was hoping that by today I'd be able to tell you my news, but I can't tell you, and it's so frustrating. But
that's right. You did say something was happening in September. Okay.
And I still can't announce it yet.
I'll give you a pass. I'll give you a pass.
Very frustrating, but I've got a very exciting project that I was working on last year, which I thought was I wasn't sure what was going to happen with it, and it's turned out really well. So it'll be happening soon, and I'll be announcing it in the next few weeks. But it's really exciting.
All right, well, that's good. Well, I wish you all the best, and I'm so glad that you know, had some free time, because I know that you're a busy guy, whether you're with your husband or your family or your work. But please pass on the next time you see Val. Give her.
I will. I'm seeing her on Friday.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, all I can say is it's just been a real treat to have you and to have these little insights. I felt like we got like a little minor workshop out of you. and that's okay. That's fantastic. I need that kind of stuff. It's been a joy. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night. I appreciate it. And I hope to have you on again when your big thing happens.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love that.
terrific. Okay, Paul, have a fantastic night. Thank you
You
again.
too.
Take care.
Thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Eric, that's
He drank way too much whiskey.
like never stop chasing your dreams.